For our first video, our attention is going to be focused on softwares used. Software used to create this database and management system. We have, well, I'll put across 5 softwares. That's Dreamweaver. We know Dreamweaver very well. We've used it before. And in this database management system, still we'll use Dreamweaver. Xamp. Xamp is a server software. We'll use that as well. CMD command prompt, which is pre-installed within any Windows version. Windows 10, Windows 8, there'll always be command prompt. Notepad++ is another software that we'll be using, as well as Photoshop. Each of these softwares has got its own specific function, different from the other, as I will be explaining, later on. Starting up with Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver has got an advantage that it allows a user use either the code or the design part. Now for the code, you can either enter the code by writing the code individually, or you can use the design to put automated objects or items within the system. In our database management system, we'll have automated tables that will need to be created automatically. So for that, we'll use Dreamweaver. We'll have parts where we'll need to create record sets. Creating a record set by writing code is a little bit difficult. So using Dreamweaver to do that automatically is an advantage. Dreamweaver, the primary function is to create the website either by writing code or by designing using the pre-installed functions within Dreamweaver. Xamp is a server software. Xamp will be basically used as a localhost server. Before we start doing anything on our database management system, since we are using a database, we'll have to start Xamp. Start Xamp software, and within Xamp software we'll start both the Apache server and the MySQL. This will allow us to work with the databases and the server much easily. If Xamp is not started, definitely there will be an error if you will need to be view the database. There will be an error. You won't be able to see anything. Next, CMD. CMD will be basically for output and display. Whatever we create in CMD will be displayed within CMD. We will initially be creating our database, creating tables, putting data into our database using CMD, and we'll be able to view whatever we'll be doing using CMD as well. That is, we'll be able to see the tables we have created, we'll be able to see the data that we have put into the tables right within CMD. So CMD is like it's like an output window, easier to work with databases. Notepad++ function, the primary function of Notepad++ is just like Dreamweaver, creating or writing code for the website. The only advantage Notepad has over Dreamweaver is that Notepad is a small software. The size is really small, so being a small software, easier to open, easier to close, easier to edit and save without, well, if you've got a computer that is a bit slow, like my computer. If you're working with Notepad, you won't have your computer dragging or slowing down at any one time. Yet with Dreamweaver, there will be some times, when you have your computer lagging, hanging sometimes, so you may have to wait a little bit. But with Notepad++, you don't have to expect any of those issues. Now, why do I recommend using Notepad++ together with Dreamweaver, yet the function may be the same. I've explained Notepad is a small software, but there are things that Notepad++ cannot do by itself. That is, you'll need to do that with Dreamweaver first. Personally, myself, I use Notepad++ for edits. I have something small I need to edit. For example, a picture is not showing. I will not open that with Dreamweaver because at that point the site will be heavy already. By the time I open it with Dreamweaver, it will take at least a few minutes before it opens, and then I start editing, which part has an issue. With Notepad++, it opens quickly. I find where the issue is, I fix the issue, save and close, and I have my output already, within a few minutes. Easier to do it with Notepad than Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver is a heavy software. Sometimes using it requires or will lead to your computer lagging or slowing down. Lastly is Photoshop. Photoshop is a graphics software. I'm recommending Photoshop, but well, for graphics you can choose any other software that you feel you are familiar with. You can use Illustrator. You can use online software. There's so many online softwares that really do picture photograph edits perfectly well. They give you the sizes that you really need for your the system. Photoshop is also quite easy to install. Photoshop and Dreamweaver normally come as a package, and for my students, well, I will try to give you all the softwares and the specific models that you need to install for this project. For Dreamweaver and Photoshop, well, I wouldn't recommend anything sophisticated. CS6 is good, CS5 is good, CS4 I'm not so sure, but I've used CS6, I've had no problems with it, so I think you can use Adobe CS6. Dreamweaver CS6 as well, Photoshop CS6 as well. CC is good, but when it comes to databases, you might have to, do some extra work, like you have to buy a plug-in for the database and include that in your Photoshop. Or downloading that plugin is quite, well, not an easy job. Best thing would be to buy it if you're using CC. But if it's a CS6, no need to do that. The database option comes right with the software itself. Once you start the software, start working on your system, the database option will be there for you to use. Xamp, for Xamp specifically, Xamp I would recommend version 5.6, not because it's the best, but because it's the version that I've used. I've had no issues with it. I've tried some other versions. I had issues with Windows being not compatible with other versions of Xamp, issues with having to format or reinstall my Windows just because the version of Xamp wasn't compatible. So 5.6 is quite okay if you're using Adobe CS6. And the other thing is Adobe CS6 will always provide your code compatible enough for Xamp 5.6. Okay. If you're using a combination of Dreamweaver and Xamp, like I said, I recommend using the version 5.6 for Dreamweaver CS6 because the SQL version for 5.6, for CS6 is always MySQL. If you are using Dreamweaver CC, then the SQL version will be upgraded to MySQL I. So that as well will not be compatible with 5.6. That means you'll need to use other versions of